I'll do that in reverse order because there's so many things I could put in Trident that I'll have to restrict myself, so I'll start with that one. The Green Party absolutely doesn't believe that Britain should have nuclear weapons, and we shouldn't renew nuclear weapons. If we got elected in 2015, and I'm not going to tell you that we'll be running the government then, but you never know, we would immediately abolish Britain's nuclear weapons. The fact is, actually, I don't think there's about £1 billion in there, and if you start listing hospitals or schools or extra facilities for universities, what you can do with £1 billion, and this goes on and on and on. But much more than that, I think what we need to ask is, why does Britain have nuclear weapons? I'd like to ask David Cameron and Ed Miliband, in what circumstances would you press the nuclear button? I cannot think of any circumstances in which a sane British Prime Minister would press the nuclear button. In which case, why would I so? There is no argument for having those weapons. Tax havens, UK uncut. You got me onto one of my favourite subjects. I'm very proud of one policy that the Green Party has, and it's not just because I happen to actually pass it at a conference. The Green Party would abolish the corporation of the City of London.
Good.
That's unusual. There's more people in this room who know about that than they usually do. It sounds very technical, and it's more symbolic than in terms of immediate impact. But what most people don't know is that the corporation of the City of London has on the floor of the House of Parliament a representative. He's called the Remembrancer, which sounds pretty archaic because it is. It goes back centuries. And it always has been a he is the only non-MP allowed on that floor of the House of Commons. And when the Commons is debating, he can wander around and whisper in the MP's ears. Now that's useful, but what's more useful from the background of that is that he also gets to see every piece of legislation as it's being drawn up and can put input from the Corporation of the City of London into that legislation as it's being drawn up before the first draft even comes out. Now that might sound like a sort of weird bit of British archaism, except for the fact that if you look what the Corporation of the City of London is for, and you can go to its own website and find that it acts to promote the liberalisation of the financial industries and globalisation. So you have the explicit advocate of liberalisation and globalisation there in the Commons with his finger in every important pie. And even more than that, if you look at what the City of London is, it's actually the last rotten borough. The people of the City of London, there's 9,000 of them, they all have a vote, which is very nice. There's 9,000 of them. There's 34,000 votes that are held by business. 9,000 people, 34,000 business votes, which I don't think I'm tall enough to do that as a graph. That is a case, and most of those business votes are financial industry. So what we have at the very heart of London, entirely separate from Boris and all of his joys and actions, a little part of the financial industry, and also they have their outpost there in Westminster. And the manufacturing industries of Britain don't have their advocate there at the heart of Westminster. The nurses of Britain don't have their advocate. The pensioners of Britain don't have their advocate. The only advocate there is the financial industries. And if you look at the fact that the IMF has labelled the City of London one of the world's worst tax havens, if you look at the fact that most of the tax havens are actually, in one way or another, related to Britain, British overseas dependencies and all the rest of it, we as Britons bear a huge responsibility for the huge network of tax havens that's there around the world. And they're sucking money out of economies, out of real investment, off into the hands of the 1%. And we absolutely have to stop that. And you mentioned transfer pricing, and that's one aspect of it. One thing I would say to you is we all need to get more aware about this and look at what's happening. And you can take small actions on your own. Don't go to Starbucks. don't have a Vodafone phone, but there are £6 billion unpaid tax bill. Look up and see what else you can do to stop supporting companies like that. It's not going to make a change, but it's a good place to start. Pollution tax, IPC, taxing carbon. There's a huge question in there that I could talk about for a long time. I was talking about the need to bring manufacturing back to Britain. And one of the things we need to do to make that happen is to actually make sure that what's now the £3 t-shirt in Topshop or Primark or wherever the £3 t-shirt is today actually has a real price tag on it. Has a price tag for the cost of shipping it here, the cost of the environmental damage that grew it in, say, Azerbaijan, that compensates the 10-year-old Azerbaijani child who should have been in school but was instead out picking the cotton, and puts that child in school and builds a school for them and makes sure their parents have enough money to live. Huge externalities in what we consume now just aren't priced in. And so I wouldn't just include carbon. What we've got to do is look at ways of ensuring that the real price, goods have a real price tag on them. And so it's not just carbon. And, you know, I think if you're interested in the environment, you can hardly fail to notice the polar sea ice that figures this year, which were at hugely record lows. But actually, we need to talk about climate change, we need to talk about lots of other issues as well. We need to talk about soil degradation, we need to talk about damage to the oceans, we need to talk about the loss of fresh water supplies, we need to talk about the loss of biodiversity, whole complex systems that we as humans ultimately depend on.
Who's going to tell the truth about the IPCC and their terrible lag, though? The BBC won't. I don't think even The Guardian will, because they are really 10 or more years behind the scenes. Well, and I think you know that, don't you?
Yeah.
All the missing feedback to all the rest of it.
I was actually talking to a scientist. He wasn't on the record, so I'm not going to name him. But I mean, he was saying that lots of scientists are now basically giving up on the IPCC because it's a political instrument and it's much too slow. And because it operates by consensus, you end up getting to the sort of lowest common denominator. So I think you're going to find there's going to be a lot more scientists speaking out. What you're not going to find the Green Party doing is spending a lot of time highlighting that, because the fact is, as a way to win hearts and minds and win votes, saying things are really terrible, it's absolutely dreadful, you should all just feel like it's an absolute disaster, I don't think is the way forward.
We're talking about policymakers knowing this, though. And if the EU is saying we're sticking rigidly behind the IPCC AR4 report, it's miles behind the game. It's not particularly the people, it's actually the policymakers are ignorant, and you ought to do something about that.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, another 3 questions.